Here we are in a squirrel's garage. Been meaning to make this video for a while. It's making this bracket on the back of the MX Sport. Now, just a precursor statement to all of this video. We moved to this state recently and everything I own is in a box. So the kerosene heater came out of that box in order to warm the garage up for today to make this video. So we're going to go over there in the way that I do these. If you have a better way of doing something, do it your way. I'll make suggestions along the way, what I would have done, but somewhere in these boxes is, say, my vise and things like that. But I just found another way to do it. So let's get to it. So to get everybody up to speed, this is what happened to my MX Sport. This bracket here broke, and it broke right there, as you can see along the center. Now, I've seen this bracket on many detectors break over, on Instagram and also on YouTube, and people go buy a replacement one. And I wasn't going to do that because I knew it was going to break again. What I've noticed is that if you're running the regular small coils, everything's fine. But when you go to the 13-inch coil, there's quite a bit of stress on this bracket, side to side like this, and then it eventually splits this. What I ended up doing was I ordered another bracket from White's, and it came in this box. I got the bracket and this book. With this bracket, what you get is you don't get the mounting screw, and you don't get the little rubber things that go on the sides, the pads. And that's all you get when you order that. So if you go the route of replacing your cuff that's in the back, make sure you get, if you lost your screw, another screw if they sell it, and then also the pads to replace the pads on there. You'll also have to move over your cuff strap because it won't come with this either. So when you buy this, that is all you get. I'm just keeping this so if I sell my MX Sport someday, I'll have it for the future purchaser in case they want it. Now, I'm not a big fan of these. I have made 2 of these brackets. The other one I sent to a digger Digaz up in Maine. She does a lot of bottle digging and metal detecting. She runs an MX Sport. Had the same problem. And but I cut hers so that this strap can be used. So you can also do that, and I'll explain that here in a minute. But I don't use it, so I'll keep it for future purchaser. And this is my old bracket. It's broke. We're not using that. So let's get into what I did. First, we're going to look at the metal detector. And I guess we'll take it apart because we can't see exactly what we need. This is the only knife I can find right here, and I generally use it quite a bit. It is a switchblade. So we'll just cut this so we can access the screws. If it bothers me, I'll go get some more of this stuff. But this padding, this is factory White's, and all I did was cut it down so that it fit on here. It's the same one that I bought it actually for my V3i. But this other padding that I have here, I got from Lowe's. As you can see, there's a screw right there. There's another one. I think it's here. I could have used all 3, but I used 2 because the factory mount only uses 1 screw in the middle. So if you use 1, you'll have the tendency to rotate around that single screw, so I used 2. So let's go ahead and take this apart so we can see what we actually built and how it goes together, so a further understanding of whenever you're building yours and the processes I took. And as you can see, as I'm backing these screws out, I already checked for the clearance of the screws going into the parts that are inside of the metal detector. These screws here, I got this at Lowe's, and it's Hillman, and this is in those pull-out drawers that are in the hardware section. These are the ones that you'll actually need. So the 10 by 32 is the thread, and the 1/2 inch is what you'll need in order to do this project. If you're just trying to replace your factory screw, say you lost it when you're putting back on the plastic one, it is actually shorter than the 1/2 inch screw. I've made these screws for other diggers because they've lost their screws in the past, and all you do is you cut those down in order to be about 1/8 of an inch shorter than this 1/2 inch screw. So the 10 by 32 1/2 inch, in order to make the direct factory screw, needs to be cut down just a little bit. But this screw I keep with that original bracket. And then I'm going to take the bracket off, and I have some more of this material here underneath to create a padding to the actual metal detector. You can see it here, a little bit in the middle and a little bit here, because I'm not a machinist and I'm just kind of making this bracket with the best ability that I have with what tools I have available. So these kind of take up some of the space in between this metal bracket and this plastic housing that makes up the metal detector. It also makes padding so that, it doesn't cause any stress cracks or anything that are in the plastic. There is 1, 2, 3 holes. You can utilize all 3, but I only utilize 2. So we're going to move the metal detector out of the way and take a look at our 2 brackets. The aluminum bracket that's on the right will not rust, and it's made out of this right here. This is just aluminum bar stock that I bought at Lowe's. They're usually in these stand-up drawers that have all kinds of different metals in them. And this was a 3-foot section. And the size of this one is 2 inch. 2 inches from one side to the other. And the thickness, I'm not sure what that was, but I think it's only 1/8 of an inch in thickness. They come in different thicknesses, but you don't need a whole lot of strength in this, so don't get something that's great big, because then it'll make your project just a little bit harder on the bending. Now with that bar stock, I didn't know how much space I would need in between, so I was going to match the original one. So all I did was take a tape measure and I measured this wing, and across the bottom in order to get a total distance of what to cut my first section of aluminum bar stock at. So 9 inches is about how much you'll cut off for this. You can make it bigger or you can make it smaller. It's all up to you. When cutting your aluminum bar stock, I used a 4-inch grinder with a metal cutting wheel on it. You can use a hacksaw if you don't have one of these. But if you do use a tool such as this, or any tool that I use here on out within this video, make sure you wear some kind of hearing protection and eye protection. Once I had my flat bar stock cut, I went back to the original one, and as we just measured it, it's about 3 inches across on the bottom. So I tried to take my bar stock and I measured in 3 inches off both sides, which this is a smaller piece. So say it was out, a little bit bigger like this. I measured in 3 inches so far, and I drew a line across it because I need to bend it right there in order to make the wings go up like this. This is one of the parts where I don't have my vise out. If I had my vise in order to bend these wings, I would have stuck 2 pieces of cardboard around the piece of bar stock and then left the top of the vise right at this bend point and then tapped on this while it was in the vise and just bent it over the vise. If you don't have a vise, pretty much everybody's got one somewhere in their garage, maybe your neighbor or family member, so you would be able to bend it somewhere. But mine's somewhere here in one of these boxes, so I went to my truck. Now this is the back of my truck, and this is what I did because it's what I had available. This is a standard 2-inch reach hitch, which this is 2 inches, goes right in. And when I put this pin across, all I did was take my mark and I put it right on the edge of where I want it bent. I slid the metal up until it got just underneath of the cross member bar that usually holds your trailer on, with this line lined up on the end of the reach hitch. And then just by eye, I took a hammer and I hit on this until it bent down nice and evenly across this straight line here. And then I turned the thing around and then I stuck it in like this, and I did the same process, which made, I had to keep adjusting a little bit here and there so I didn't have one wing down here and then one wing way up here until it was nice and even. Now I know everybody's laughing at me right now saying I'm nuts, but it's what I had, so that's what I did. Just remember, you can do whatever you would like in order to bend that wing on there. So now that you would have something that looks similar to this, but it would be straight across the bottom, you need to try to put this bevel in it, because the machine has a bevel in it right here. Because if you can't lay it on there flat because it just doesn't work, so you're gonna have to bend it some way. And being that I don't have a real good way to do it, this is how I did it. I just took 2 thin pieces of wood that were thinner than the diameter of some pipe that I had laying in a garage. I can't remember what this is from, but this is just a piece of conduit, and you can see that one's bigger than the other. So I laid 2 of these next to each other on a concrete floor, and then I put this bigger tube in the middle. So it ended up looking like this. And then the bar stock would, you know, teeters across that. So all I did was start tapping on it with a hammer, and I would stick things underneath of it, like say this side, in order to keep it from flipping real hard whenever I was hitting it with a hammer, and just whatever I could find, piece of cardboard, something like that, until it started putting an arc on both sides of that metal. Now it will make your wings start getting out of center again, so it's a balance. You keep beating on it and it'll start putting this arc in, and then this wing will start getting out a little out of whack, you know, further out this way or further in, until finally you get it right. So it takes a little bit of time getting that, but eventually it comes out. And you can see this side's not absolutely perfect. That side's a little better. This was just the first attempt, and I learned all my mistakes making this one. So in the second one, this is how I did it. The first one, I was just beating it over top of the pipe without the two pieces of wood on the side, and it didn't do all that great. Now, somebody with the right tools could really do this really fast, and probably very cheaply if you went to a machine shop and said, hey dude, do you mind making me something that looks, you know, like this plastic cuff but is in metal and has a contour to the middle of it? And they'd probably do it, but if you want to try this at home, like I've said plenty of times already, this is how I did it. Trying to find out where you drill the holes is somewhat tough. All I did was I started in the middle because I knew it would match up with one of the 3 holes that are on the machine. I used a 3/16" drill bit, and all I did was I picked the spot visually in the middle of my arc, this arc here, and just picked what I would call top dead center and drilled a hole straight through it. And then after I drilled the hole, this is a cheap mortising bit. They make these in many different configurations. It's just a bit that makes a beveled edge because the top of our screw is beveled like this, and it makes it flush with the top of the aluminum, so that, you know, you don't have a screw sticking out where your arm's down there inside that cuff. So all I did was take this and put it on a drill, and I kept eating away until there was a nice area that the screw that holds it in place would fit through, and it also be flush with the top of the cuff. Now, if you go ahead and finish the top of this with some kind of rubber mat like I did, then, you know, it's not that big a deal if it sticks up a little bit, because you're going to cover it up with a pad. So it's all up to you and how far you want to take it. And then once I got one screw hole made, I went back to the machine, I put a screw in here, and then I put a little bit of paint on top of this screw. All I did was take that screw and I ran it down, just finger tight. Don't drive it home with a screwdriver. And then with the paint on top of it still wet, I went ahead and stuck this screw in there. And this hole's not drilled yet. And this is the only version I have. It does have a hole, but all I did was try to keep it flat and then start my screw a little bit. And then I squared it up visually with the machine and then kind of moved it around a little bit. And then without getting too squirrely with it and making a lot of paint on the bottom, I picked it back up, and on the bottom I would have had a paint circle, and you can see it still there. See that blue paint? That's what I was using to mark where I should drill. So then from the bottom side I drilled a hole, and then once I got the hole drilled, I made another beveled section here. And if you wanted to go to the third hole here, all these are the same. You could mount 3 screws in that, but I just did 2. I figured it was sufficient. So how do we get our shaping? And if we want to use a cuff, how do we get that hole? Now, if you have a giant knee mill in your garage, which I do not, you got to use a Dremel tool. I used a Dremel tool with standard heavy-duty cutting wheels, and they're just like that big 4-inch grinder. If you can see that there, it's just like a grit that's been glued together, and it spins on the end of a Dremel tool. So I just picked a section that was wide enough to fit my cuff strap that, you know, normally would have the Velcro on it. And I cut inside here, and I cut a straight line. And then I went back through and I cleaned it up with these little cutting wheels. Those holes were ultimately hard to do, because whenever you're cutting straight into the side of metal and not in here and going in here, because you need to leave these sides to be supportive to the top, when your wheel goes in, it jumps out on you and it wants to track along the edge of the metal, which that's okay. You're going to damage this while you're trying to cut that hole, but you're going to go through probably 2 of these wheels per hole that you make on the sides, and that's all I did in order to cut that big enough so that I could feed that strap through. Now this one doesn't have it because I don't typically use that strap. And in order to do the shaping on the sides and cleaning all this up, especially if I gouged it when I was
you know, beating on it on the truck or in a vise or trying to cut this side hole, all I did was use this, which is a Dremel with this paddle sander. Paddle sanders are about $12. They're a little expensive. Now you can get this same paddle sander for the big 4-inch grinder, but you're really going to be eating into this thing. You can use it, just be gentle with it. And they are dangerous. When you're sanding with them, they can grip and then take off real fast and then, you know, go right up your arm. So it's not the most friendly tool, but it does work. So all I did was, you know, just on this beveled edge, I was trying to match what kind of looked like the factory. So I took this sander and I just sanded along the edges and down, sanded on this for a long time in order to get that beveled. Smoothed off all the edges and made nothing where, you know, it won't catch on your clothes or on your skin, and it looks, you know, presentable. And I also used what's called a mill bastard, which is really, everybody just calls a file, but this is a metal file, and I used that to do some shaping as well. And in the end, after I got all that done and the holes drilled, I went to Lowe's and I got this padding stuff. So I just cut a section to put in here. I cut a piece to put it here, here, and here, just to keep that metal away from the plastic body and the metal detector. And then I had these laying around for replacement on my V3i. I bought 2 packs. One is a backup. This is the backup. I actually had to cut a section of it off. So I just laid it up there and then bent it around the edge, then mark where I needed to cut it, stuck it on, did the same thing here, and I put that stuff from Lowe's there. But don't put it on before you put your screws in. So go ahead and mount this to the metal detector with those pads on the bottom, and then put that last piece on to cover up the screws. And then it looks, you know, really finished. And I've hunted with this all year with the 13-inch D-Tech, swinging through corn stalks and bean fields and high grass, and a lot of tension on the metal detector where, you know, if this thing's on my arm and I'm swinging that big 13-inch coil through corn stalks, I mean, it's jarred every couple seconds. Really hard, actually. And, you know, the added weight of that coil on the bottom of it, you know, just increases it even more. So this thing hasn't budged an inch. It hasn't, you know, failed in any way. Hasn't hurt the metal detector, and it's just what I did in order to replace the plastic one. That's it, my MX Sport bracket. I'll go ahead and put it on and give you a couple views of it up close before the end. So, but thank you for watching. Hopefully this helps somebody out. Take care.